we would like to, I know you will let us know. Oh, there are also other members that of the public, and maybe at an appropriate moment you let us know if there are some special people that I may not have introduced, but you think they are in attendance, and members of the public. These could be online or here present. Members of the public, you are most welcome, and we are glad you have joined us. Now, without much ado, we would like to dive into what has brought us here. Moris, doctor to become, so soon maybe. This is your defense. You're coming to talk to us about what you have been doing, but unfortunately, much as you've done it for a number of years, for us, we shall summarize it in minutes. And so we shall give you a maximum of 30 within which you should be able to talk to us about your work that you have been doing. And now that you're here, it means you passed it already in its written form, but you're here to talk to us about it orally. So we shall invite you to use maximum 30 minutes. Secondly, before you start your presentation, we shall allow you to have anything you would like to say to us in a way of putting a disclaimer, just in case you feel that what we knew has slightly been changed. So you can inform us of what's significant, uh, items or aspects that you could have already changed so that we do not look at you at the way we looked at your work some time ago. So you will make that declaration in case. And then after, we shall right away invite you to make your presentation. Before I do that, may I invite Dr. Lois Cosi to give us a prayer. A prayer can never be brief. It remains a prayer. Thank you.
Chair, before I pray, I wanted to request for more time because I think we had already communicated to the student that he's given 1 hour. We need permission from you legally. Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair. I think the student can prepare themselves mentally to adjust from 1 hour to 30 minutes. So members, let's humble ourselves as we pray for this process. Lord God, we thank you for this bright morning. We thank you that we woke up alive. We thank you for everybody in this room who has been able to make it to help escort Moris on this academic journey. It's an important day for him and for whoever has been involved in his research. Give us wisdom, give the candidate wisdom, give us grace, give the candidate grace, so that his discussion can be understood and he may also be able to understand our input for the betterment of his work. We place this day into your hands and we pray that it is successful, and in Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you so much for that prayer, Dr. Lois Kopsinje. May I invite the candidate, and I give you 2 minutes to talk about what you think we may need to know before we invite you to make your presentation.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Moris, Matembu, Kipuru. I want to thank the chair for the opportunity given to me to make a presentation about my work. is asked as to whether I have anything that I should put forward for disclaimer about what has been known. And candidly, I would say not any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members of the panel, is there any one of you that may want to declare conflict of interest before we officially begin the process? Yes, Professor Answebuga.
The candidate, let him talk about himself, where he's working, and a few things about himself.
Moris, due to public demand, people want to know you.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. I'm Moris Matembu, Kipuru. I work at Mountains of the Moon University. I teach psychology. Thank you so much.
Okay, may we now invite you to talk to us about your work. Thank you so much.
I do thank you for the opportunity granted to me to share my research. I want to begin on a note of allowing me to share that this is something quite personal and close to me. A few years I came to my career from the seminary, and someone wrote me a letter. He had been working at School of Education for quite a while and said, we need a degree and nothing else. And while I was in the meeting, someone again said, young man, are you seeing that person there on the pool table? And I said, yes, I do see mom. And then she said, I do wish that you don't do what they're doing. It has been around for more than 10 years. I read a work by someone called Sam, who said, the transition from high school to university is quite crucial and essential in the success, especially determining retention and possibly the success of a student at university. At the same time, she went on to say the experiences of what this person does once they are in university is very, very much more important in trying to give a waiver for their background. Now, to that, therefore, I came up with a topic, predicting academic achievement in higher education, an examination of factors influencing academic persistence and performance of undergraduate students. Why this study anyways? It all came about because of the experience and what I had seen come across, that is a critical issue of declining performance and of course academic persistence among the undergraduate students at Makerere University. That while many actually do come in, what happens is we have a number of them who fall short of the goal, which was to come in and get their degree. And yet for others who may go on until the very end, it so happens that they end up having disappointing outcomes. And this again, I must say, it was still personal, close to someone whom I shared a room with, who worked very hard at that time. And by the time we were leaving, he was not impressed about their performance. And when I tried to ask him what had happened, he said, I gave it my best. There are some statistics, of course, to show that. I looked at a few instances, especially when it comes to performance. I looked at School of Law 2017, a number of the second upper classes, those who came out with lower classes. And then the most alarming was the incident of 2019, which was published that over 1,800 students got disqualified actually from my university because actually they failed to meet up with academic qualifications well. And of course, all the things have been put out there or emphasized. For example, some time back, the Deputy VC academics before the parliamentary committee noted of the worrying student performance at the Ivory Tower. And recently during our graduation here, I remember the opening remarks by the Minister of Education who pointed out the decreasing graduation rates, an indication that actually not everyone was persisting to the very end. What is the implications or ramifications of we having our students come in but not being able to get to conclusion? One, it will mean that actually we would have reduced numbers of students who complete their degrees, which is, of course, high dropout rates. It tarnishes the institutional reputation. And of course, it puts one to question the efficacy of institution in fulfilling its mandate of course, ensuring that everyone who comes in goes out successfully. But of course, many have said, have written, or we know very much about the essence of the purpose of higher education and what it can do for socioeconomic development of the country and social employability. But also, I also note that it is very key to note that education or higher education becomes a life changer for so many. What's the purpose of my study? The purpose of my study was to identify the determinants of academic persistence and performance, concentrating on student background factors, and of course, once they come in, what do they do at the university? Therefore, I did concentrate on the university experiences. And why so? I wanted to find out how student background factors do interact with the experiences they have at university to shape their academic performance and their ability to persist to the end. I want to take some time on the issue of having to unpack what I mean by the student background factors. There are quite many, but I had an interest in a few of them. And one of them happened to be their high school performance, to be specific, the A-level grades, which of course the prerequisite for them as they come to university. I looked at the socioeconomic status, and while it is quite broad, I also focus on two elements, and that is one, the parental level of education, and the other is the income levels back at home. And the other element, still under student background characteristics, that I did focus on was the essence of personality. I do understand that as they come in and the experience they go through, it's very important to look at what their personality do can actually towards their ability to remain resilient and finish their programs. And of course, see how that actually influences their experiences at university. There are also quite a number of institutional experiences. However, I also did concentrate on just three. One, the academic involvement. Two, the social integration. And thirdly, the commitment. The objectives of the study. One, I did aim at examining the relationship between the student background factors and the institutional experiences. How does where someone is coming from and who they are actually influence what they do at university? Of course, among the undergraduate students at Makerere University. Two, I did have an objective of evaluating the extent to which institutional experiences, that is academic engagement, social integration, and core commitment, influences the academic outcomes. And the outcomes I'm measuring here are basically two. One, which is persistence to graduation, and of course, the other is the CGPA. And thirdly, the objective was to analyze the relationship between the student background factors and academic outcomes. That's where someone's coming from influence what they reap at university, but in so doing, while also looking for the mediating role the institutional experiences do play towards that outcome. I have some research questions, and this one's coming because of the methodological design that I'll discuss at a much later stage. The first one is, what contextual factors do account for the relationship between students' background characteristics and, of course, their institutional experiences? Secondly, I did have the question, how do final year students at Makerere University conceptualize how the institutional experiences do shape the outcomes in terms of the performance and ability to persist to graduation? And thirdly, in what ways do institutional experiences actually mediate the relationship between the students' background characteristics and their education outcomes? Owing to the objectives, the study was guided by a number of alternative hypotheses. While I have three research objectives, I need to note that each of that objective, like I did unpack earlier on, there are sub-variables under there. For example, under background characteristics or factors, I did mention personality or conscientiousness, gender, family, socioeconomic status, and A-level academic performance. And all that under the first hypothesis, it stated that student background characteristics significantly influence the specific university experiences among the third-year students. The second hypothesis derived from the objective relation between the experiences and outcomes. It stated that student institutional experiences significantly influence academic performance at CGPA and persistence to graduation among undergraduate students. And thirdly, that student background characteristics or factors significantly influence, of course, academic outcomes, and that is persistence at CGPA, of course, mediated by the institutional experiences. So these are the hypothesis I did test in this study. My objectives are derived from the conceptual framework over there. This conceptual framework is something that I did develop or come up with following the two theories that actually did support my study. Under background characteristics, I have those four variables: family, socioeconomic status, high school performance, gender, and personality, that is conscience, let's be specific. And unfortunately, it has that middle box and the arrows have not been able to be visible. But it's supposed to be that the first objective should have been having the arrow between the background characteristics and then these institutional experiences. That's the objective number one. And objective number two, that is the relationship between these institutional experiences, the three, and the relationship to what education outcomes, that is persistence, and then CGPA. And the third objective is coming from the relationship between the background characteristics going over to those educational outcomes. The study was grounded in two complementary or complementing theories, one of it being Tinto's 1975 student integration theory, and the second being Austin's 1984 and 93 involvement theory. Excuse me. Tinto, the notion behind his theory is that social integration is very crucial in determining or in having to shape the possible learning outcomes. He does notes that any student who comes to a university and finds a compatibility with the institutional social agents, in this case, I was much focused on one, peers, and secondly, on with the members of the faculty, that such a student has a high probability of being able to persist to the very end. And besides that, they're able to get the support that actually enables them to perform well. In terms of structure, he recognizes that actually the student, before he integrates, he's coming from somewhere. And so he acknowledges the pre-university characteristics, which actually shape this social integration. And then in turn, it does have an impact on the academic outcomes or education outcomes. That is, one, performance, and two, the power to persist. And so looking at that structure, though linear it is, it did make a basis, or it formed the foundation for me to examine the mechanisms through which education outcomes can be achieved. Secondly, Austin 1984 and 1993 involvement theory. He does emphasize that the learner's ability to invest psychological and physical energy to be involved in a campus academic system is very essential in determining their personal growth. And that theory, later in 1993, he did actually expand on it, and he noted that it operates in such a way that a student who comes to the university, when he comes in, he's an input, and he comes in with certain factors, like their past or prior academic performance, talks about things like their socioeconomic background and many others. And that shapes the environment, which is here I have mentioned in the concept framework, the institutional experiences. And then that environment is what actually determines finally what will be the outcomes. And so these two theories became the underpinning, guiding models for my study in trying to predict what is the what are the mechanisms that can lead to academic achievement at university. The methodology of my study, I did take on the post-positive paradigm. Why? Because when I was doing my literature review, I discovered that quite a number of studies had been carried out on the matter, on the subject of education outcomes, especially persistence. But what happened, or what actually became intriguing to me was most of them, especially in the Western world, have taken on actually the quantitative methodology. And philosophically and trying to search for the truth, it does mean that not every truth is objective. You can take on this subjective view to actually complement that objective truth. And henceforth, I did pick on, or I selected the post-positive paradigm to guide my study. But why? Because according to the post-positivists, they view the world as being ambiguous. And therefore, there are many narratives behind a particular truth. And of course, it acknowledges that the world is both objective and subjective. And so at the back of my mind, this was going to guide my methodology. in such a way that if I am to only get the profiles, which are actually much gotten when you do or use quantitative methodology, would I be able to get the causal explanation? And that is what actually led me to click on the positivism paradigm to support my methodological choice. Because I wanted that after getting those profiles, the other thing was to find out what explains that relationship. Research design, following the positive narrative that actually, of course, seconds the use of a mixed study, I did select a sequential explanatory mixed method research design. Why? Of course, because one, it puts prominence or it puts much attachment to quantitative results. And after that, you take aim at having to seek explanation for those profiles. And henceforth, I took on the sequential explanatory mixed methods research design. Of course, the quantitative method using the questionnaire, and the qualitative, I did use interviews. The study population. I want to begin by acknowledging one thing at the time when I did collect this data. I'm happy to be here today physical. When I did last time my proposal presentation, it was online because of COVID. And so at the time of the data, the university was having a number of issues. Of course, we're having the restrictions, but also the partial opening. And what I did here was one, of course, I focused on the third years, and I will give reasons why I did focus on final year students than not any other cohort because of some literature recommendations, especially by Altman 2017, who notes in his monograph that persistence and achievement in academics, where he recommends studies focusing on persistence should can take on the finalist students. Why? Because the first or sophomore students may not be having some of the experiences ready at hand to use them to gauge the intentions of persistence or graduation. But if the population was third year, and the schools here were 4 strategically selected to try to capture the diverse range of academic disciplines representing both STEM and the humanities programs. The sampling strategy, I did use the simple random sampling for quantitative affairs. Why so? Because one, of course, I know it does rhymes with the random sampling, but also given the logistical strains at the time, it gave me a chance to have inclusivity and allowing a great chance of participation within the selected population in the schools that actually did participate in. And of course, also did help in trying to minimize the risk of sampling error as advocated by some researchers. And also, of course, it also addressed the common challenges of self-administered surveys. For example, the low response rates. You give so many questionnaires, and then not all might be brought back. But also important, like I said earlier on, I did that because it catered for logistical constraints of a hybrid teaching modality at the time that was, of course, both online and physical. That is for quantitative method. And then for the qualitative, I did use the criterion or the purposive technique. Here, I did select or I picked on the participants purposely. One, they must have participated in the responding of the questionnaire because I was after explanation of the results for which I had gotten during the first phase of the quantitative data collection and analysis. And of course, this was a follow-up to explore and explain, especially my focus was on statistically significant findings through the subjective perspectives of the participants, put in mind, like I said earlier on, it was guided by the paradigm that the world and the truth is ambiguous. It cannot be only objective, but also bring in the aspect of the subjective views to get a clear explanation behind those possible relationships. The sampling determination, sample determination, from the 4 schools that actually were involved in this study, given that I did use a simple random method, each and every student in the schools, like I said, I don't want to cater for the issue of sampling error, but also the issue of the response rate was actually given the questionnaire. The return rate was 924. Those that were valid after intensive screening was 754, and that is what became the quantitative sample. And of course, the response rate was 59.2%. That is quite considered okay when it comes to the benchmarks of generalizability of the findings. Then for qualitative phase, this was, like I said, came from those students who had participated in the response to the questionnaire. However, when they were given the questionnaire, they had also to consent as to whether they would be willing to participate in a future interview after the analysis of the data they had granted. Those who consented provided their contacts and they were to be approached in the future. But I must note, at the time of the qualitative data collection, this cohort of students were actually out of university. And so I had to reach a number of them. And given the logistical challenges, 14 willingly accepted to be part of this. And of course, the one-on-one interviews were both via phone. And for those who are around the city, we did do a one-on-one physical interviews. Data collection procedure. It was conducted in 2 phases. For quantitative data, I did use the self-reported standardized questionnaire with the 6 sections covering 82 items. I sought approval from MACREC, a letter from the Dean of Students, and after that, of course, I was introduced to the different deans of the schools for which I was going to pick the data. And it's upon that actually I sought advice from those different deans on how I would go about. And the one thing they did for me that I appreciate was giving to me the HODs, who then upon a time did ask that I should focus on larger classes because of the modalities at the time. For the qualitative process, which was meant to explain what was in the findings of the quantitative research, what I did was these were reached out, those who had consented and provided their contacts, and the interviews took on at a convenient time, and those interviews were actually recorded on the consent of the participants. Validity and reliability. Of course, validity, I took it because the questionnaire was coming from, it was standardized, so I took it as being valid. But I also did a reliability test of this first, when I did a pilot study with the intent of wanting to find out a number of things, the response, the time to take, any difficulty in it, and so the values I got. This reliability and validity of this tool on African continent, that people have used it before. I have Oxman et al. 2022. I have Ibiola 2015. I have another study by Tefara and Robin 2017. So then in a current state, after collecting my data, I had to carry out another reliability test, and those are the values I got, and most of them, of course, prove that it was a reliable tool. Analysis procedure. For quantitative phase, I did use the SPSS version 26, and the steps I took was 1, to screen the data, clean it, handle missing values using imputation of missing variables. In particular, I used serial mean imputation. I did collateral test, numeric testing, and then of course I did the data analysis itself, entailing one, descriptive, and then inferential statistics. Inferential statistics entailed bivariate correlation, mode, and linear regression, and of course a mediation analysis in line to the objectives of the study. The qualitative phase, this one entailed having to transcribe a one-to-one interviews, and I did use the manual latent thematic analysis procedure, which involved identifying, analyzing, and then reporting the patterns within the data. Of course, the focus was for me to establish the key themes which would explain the quantitative findings I had sought or found out earlier on. The whole process I had to follow the procedure put forward by Brown and Clark. And those steps are: one, get familiar with the data itself; two, begin to come up with codes. The other is you search for themes, review those themes, and after reviewing those themes, be able to define those themes, and then later finally produce a report, of course, with accompanying narratives to defend them. I found this to be flexible and effective for me, especially because I wanted those contextual elements to explain my quantitative work. And henceforth, I have given reasons why actually I had to go for a manual analysis over the software. One would be that actually it gave me a chance to richly actually get engaged with the data I had found out. And just so to say that if I was looking for a particular pattern as to why a particular finding was what it was, then I had a true explanation for it other than actually relying on set algorithms. Then, of course, it was more flexible and adaptive, especially when it came to, for me, developing my codes and themes, which actually came as I went on interacting with my data. And then, of course, the other is the hands-on approach became for me more cohesive. And of course, it enabled me to have a better explanation of my results. The findings from the study, I need to note, this study was predominant, it had more of female to male. I think partly to explain that, especially in cases of school of education and psychology, it does happen that females tend to be more than the gents. The sample size, of course, was 754. The age group was predominant 2024. And I think this is a pattern of most of the students who are completing campus in third year. Academic programs that involve education, psychology, engineering, and social sciences. And then, of course, like I said, I concentrated on finalists. And for the case, for example, of engineering, their programs take on more than 3 years. We're seeing somewhat 4 years in what are involved, because I want to look at the different perspectives from different programs about university experiences and their backgrounds in having to shape the narrative of what happens thereafter. It's not so quite clear. These were the student background characteristics, A-level points. Those were below 10 points were that number, around I think 19, 11 to 15 were I think the moderate number. 16 to 20 reported to be I think the first or to be predominant in this group. How did I measure the socioeconomic status? I was using the perceived economic status back at home. How often you worry about this? Do you live a luxury and what have you? That's how I did measure socioeconomic status. I looked at the furthest level of education, and of course, quite a number of them did report coming from at least parents who had actually attained tertiary education. But though, of course, a number of them also did report coming from families whose education background was not that great. And the significance of that is, would assume that those who came from families with parents who had actually maybe a degree could be like the aspect of the educational, maybe to say, capital, that maybe the parents valued education, maybe that could have contributed in such a way to their university experience, but that was yet to be tested and find out as to whether that holds or not. The GPAs, From the group that participated, only 38 reported being in the first class range. Our second class honors upper were 428. Second class honors lower, there were 237. And then the third class were 14. And of course, I didn't know that for lower achieving students, the implication would be that there was need for improving academic support, maybe peer group interactions, and of course, the institutional integration, which of course, literature notes that when supporting, when they work with others, they can be able to be somewhere. Low portion of first class indicates that I think there's need for further strategies that may be needed to motivate them towards exceptional performance. Does someone, or do they revalue that getting a first class is something so important? Or now the inferential statistics and findings here, this is what I set out to find out. Objective number one was to establish the relationship between student background factors and their institutional experiences. And here I was looking at conscientiousness. Did it actually have in any way an impact or influence on the academic engagement, on the integration or commitment? And the first finding under that objective that conscientiousness was positively related to two measures of institutional experiences. That was academic engagement and social integration. And the themes I got from that was because conscientious students happened to be one hardworking, they happened to be organized in terms of creating schedules and being able to follow the schedules. If it came to say, for example, they're given assignment, they would do the assignment on time. And then being proactive in attitude. Many of them mentioned how they took initiative in taking charge of their academic and social life. The other one was the studies have found gender differences in social integration and academic commitment. An explanation there was because of motivation, culture expectations are not a view. I also found that family income negatively influences academic engagement. But this was negative. That is because the reasons were giving was the unconducive reading home environment, emotional and psychological distress. Many were worrying about whether they even get tuition. And some even noted how, for example, towards the exam time when they talk about exam permits as a leeway to sit exams, they didn't have them. So they experienced that and it became a distraction to their academic engagement. Then D, I found that there was a negative significant correlation between A-level points and social integration. These guys seem to be so much academic oriented, being so much, taken up, saying, actually, some reported being guilty that they would abandon their studies to go, for example, for a social event at university, and an aspect of them being so much focused on their studies. What are the recommendations to that object and the findings? One, that influence the positive influence of conscientiousness on institutional experiences. One, I recommend that actually there ought to be a faculty-led training workshops and maybe support programs which should focus on cultivating conscience behaviors among students, being organized, doing the work on us. I think it's a common trend I've seen around campus when you give, for example, an assignment and give a deadline, the conscious student will pay heed of the deadline, but the others will give excuses. So if that can, then the other was, of course, the observed gender differences. One, we should consider unique motivations of female students because, for example, in the study found that female students were found to be more committed than their male counterparts. And a number of things they were trying to put forward is because of the value they put towards the education. I remember one of the, I mean, so vivid in my head, one lady who told me, that I have come this long because I want to have a better life. I don't want actually man to take charge of my life. I want to be in charge of my what? My life. Creation of safe, inclusive spaces for all students, particularly female students, to foster peer and faculty relationships free from any threat of agitation. and of course also having workshops on gender sensitivity and respect for personal boundaries for both learners and staff. To enhance the academic and social experience of students from low income backgrounds, thinking that we can think about one, expanding the current scholarship opportunities and also creating, of course, emergency financial aid to help alleviate the challenges they find. By the someone, when I talked about, when I shared one, if they knew about the higher education fund, said, I don't know about it. I don't even know where they apply from. A sign that actually there's need to provide more information about some of these available financial opportunities, because some I need, but the problem is they don't have vital information. We can also encourage work study programs, going, say, for example, evening program, go and work during day and then have time for evening sessions. Or, of course, all it can be also prepared with on-campus employment opportunities, especially for those who could be doing well academically, but are faced with financial challenges. I found that actually many of them were complaining of being stressed. They can't concentrate because they're worried about if they'll be able to sit for exams. So offering counseling services to help such overcome the emotional challenges linked to financial difficulties. To promote greater integration, more social for high achieving students, because there's a negative relationship. The learners who came in with those higher grades tended to be actually less involved in social activities, many of them reporting actually being guilty if they left their studies. Actually, one said, how does it feel for me to come here with good grades, but I go away with a bad degree? It would be like I did not actually, maybe I cheated in high school, so I have to give time. So in this case, I think we can foster academic networking schemes and culturally relevant social events that actually can encourage meaningful connections. Objective number 2 was to determine the relationship between the institutional experiences, that is academic engagement, social integration, and commitment, and the outcomes, which is persistence and GPA. And I need to note that the findings are quite significant in a way that, one, about the relationship between engagement and outcomes. It was found that learners or students who academically gave in their physical and psychological energy towards academically constructive activities tended to persist. At the same time, they also did end up having a good CGPA. I think it's why when looking to the results that we had, a number of them were in second-class upper honors. The reason they gave here was that when they get engaged, they comprehended the concepts being taught to them, but also others talked about how they became confident, especially when it came to the time of sitting the examinations. They were less anxious. 2, we found that another institutional experience, that is goal commitment, that there was a correlation positive between commitment and persistence. However, commitment did not mean someone getting a higher CGPA. Why was this? The reason they gave was partly because with commitment, they had a self-regulation of their behaviors. Many of them, of course, who had aspirations and what view that actually made them to stay disciplined in their academic journey at university. But at the same time, they also, of course, that necessarily actually being disciplined does not mean actually it is a guarantee for one to get higher CGPAs. That's why it only did, in this case, explain only persistence. The other one was on social integration. I did find that students who were in touch with the peers and members of the faculty, there was a positive correlation with both CGPA and persistence. And many of them talked about how this brought about the sense of community, a sense of belonging. And some talked about how it gave them that emotional support, especially if they were met with any challenge. But of course, also did promote the element of academic collaboration, because this is where the much meeting to discuss all this. The recommendations for this is to harness, for example, the relation between academic engagement and outcomes like CGP and persistence, think we should look towards promoting meaningful engagements. For example, members of staff promoting interactive teaching, fostering environments like study groups, class presentations, peer discussions in and outside class that actually can bring about that, can promote that. Then for the element of core commitment and academic persistence, I was talking about that. Now, many of these who, when it came to interview, talking about those who are committed actually having this self-regulating behavior of there's something they're pursuing or they're after, which means that from that, to promote it further, we could integrate goal-setting practices among the students actually right from first year. So actually, this can help them to stay committed. Where necessary, giving them the personal support, also beginning from first year, especially when it comes to creating personal academic plans, defining clear but also achievable goals aligned to, of course, each and every one of their values and their career aspirations. And of course, it's very important to having a sense of direction and purpose. This support service can be given to students right from first year so they can remain committed and can foster or enhance one, of course, persistence to completion. To harness the positive impact of social integration on persistent CGPA, here I would propose or recommend that there's need to foster academically focused interactions among students. There are those actually who, even when they didn't want to be part of these events, but I think if we can change that, actually a number of these activities can have the academic aspect in it, they can actually be ready to embrace. And of course, it's creating a strong sense of belonging within a supportive academic environment. Objective number 3 was to analyze the relationship between student background factors and academic outcomes, while also considering the mediating role of institutional experiences in this relationship. The first finding was that there was a positive correlation between conscientiousness and academic persistence. And this relationship happened to be mediated by 1, social integration, and 2, it was mediated by academic engagement. And some of the reasons they put forward was having a strong commitment, especially among the conscious students. They tend to look out for the best avenues that can help them or support them towards getting their goals. The other was they will look out for friends who are supportive emotionally, but also importantly for those who can help them when they're in need of their academic support. So this is why actually, yes, conscientiousness did positively influence persistence, but of course it did not influence CGPA. 2, I found a significant positive correlation between A-level scores and university CGPA. Most of the students who enrolled to university with higher CGPA, it did influence their likelihood of the CGPA they would get. And in this, that possibility was mediated, unfortunately, negatively by social integration. Actually, earlier on I said most students who came in with higher A-level grades tend to be less socially integrated because they are more of academic-oriented persons or minds. So it doesn't surprise me that here, when I came to carry out a mediation analysis, that it was negative. Recommendation to that, of course, like I talked about for conscientiousness, we still need to cultivate the element of those practical skills in self-discipline, responsibility, and determining, of course, determination among students. Also promoting mentorship programs and among the learners or peers, collaborative teaching, work student engagement initiatives to build meaningful connection. Actually, some of them were reporting how some lecturers are not approachable, but others also noted how they had a very good relationship with the lecturers that was supporting them was being persistent. Actually, one said, I even fear to fail his paper. To maximize the positive rating between A level and strong CGPAs, I think we could look into putting in place the research-based learning opportunities. It can be challenging to them, but also academically stimulating to them, so that they can keep on pushing. Also, of course, encouraging collaboration of students and faculty. To address the negative mediation effect of student integration on the relation between A level and university CGPA, I thought that here, if we promoted academically oriented social networks, this would actually bring in the peer support. And of course, there can be benefits without actually compromising one's academic focus. In conclusion, the findings of said actually highlight the number one, very significant, of course, predictive role of background factors and institutional experiences in shaping education outcomes, both CGPA and performance. However, I note that it does appear that what students do once they're in university can actually make up for their backgrounds or where they're coming from, and henceforth harnessing or improving the institutional experiences of the students, it can actually make a great difference in helping them to attain their dreams. My study has some limitations. One of it is an aspect of generalizability. Why so? Because I concentrated on the senior students and from 4 schools. And therefore, of course, that means it could be or it could not be, but other cohorts are left out. And that's why I recommend that future studies could actually put in consideration of other cohorts, first year, second, or even possible, have a longitudinal study that actually can make up for the experiences of students right from year 1 to the completion. The small sample size for the quantitative phase, because of what I did mention, I had 14 students sharing their experiences. And like you would see, the findings are quite a number. It was quite tedious, but future studies could look at a wider sample for qualitative research. And then the aspect of social desirability, what should I say? That could also be an issue, a limitation. I say this, I can be judged, or I should not say this or the other. And then the potential bias in quantitative data, especially when it came to A-level results, because it was self-reported. However, I need to note for the CGPAs, that was not because it was catered before we got the real final results through the different administrators. Then reliance on a cross-section data limits, it's a bit to, of course, capture change. Like I said, I did carry it in among the 3rd years. So there's need to future studies to look at broader cohorts of students, so to have the different experiences and what would be the challenges. This is something which my external examiner said doesn't work. It's not so big an issue, but I remember earlier on it was mentioned when I was presenting this work to my doctoral committee. The size of the questionnaire, it had 82 items. I mentioned it here, but when I got a report from examiner, I was saying this is not an issue because these are students. But of course, the issue is can bring about fatigue and disengagement. And there's a possibility of getting what? Nomadic what? Like responses. These have come, of course, from what I've said, what I recommend for future research. Maybe what I just add is number 4. Given the aspect of the current aspect of the mental health issues among students, I would suggest that actually future studies look into incorporating this aspect in their studies to look at how does the well-being of the student impact academic success and persistence of students at the university. I thank you for your kind listening.
Thank you, and thank you again. we had to put in consideration what your mothers had submitted to us, although someone whispered that that was out of scope. But we want again to thank you, and I think Jay will get you a bottle of water. Don't feel shy to open it and drink it. And drink it. Thank you so much. May I at this time invite a very important person? But before that, I also would like to recognize Dr. Simon Nantam, who is a member of the panel that joined us along the way. Dr. Nantam, you're welcome. Plus other members of the public. And we also have Gerard joining us. You're welcome. Thank you for coming. May I invite Professor Atibundi? Professor Atibundi has always been introduced by me to us, the members here, but one important key is that he is a professor of educational psychology from Bustamante University. He has been a head of department, he's a researcher, and he has been, I think, if the school allows, he can become our permanent critical reviewer. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. May I invite you? Professor, I think you work within the 1 hour to interact with this candidate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the panel, the doctoral committee, members of the public, and our esteemed candidate. Ladies and gentlemen, it's yet another great honor to be here in our mother institution, in our flagship institution, in the largest institution, in the words of Mr. Kipuru, to enjoy the vision of this mother institution, being a thought leader of knowledge generation for societal transformation and development. And I think the few times I've come here for this function, there is clear evidence of that vision being realized. Yeah, I want to thank you for that. Mr. Kipuru, I know you have had lectures of more than 2 hours, 3 hours before you could remain standing, but in the event that you feel you would wish to have a seat now, it's okay, you can have a seat. But as long as Mr. Farouk, your technology allows us to sometimes interact as the occasion warrants. So I'm going to break my being here into 4 parts. Number 1, I will appreciate the work done. Number 2, I'll raise a few questions. Number 3, I'll give some little guidance. And number 4, I will make a Thanksgiving remark. Yeah, so number 1, Mr. Kipuru, I want to thank you that you have touched what is at the heart of every psychologist, especially educational psychologist, that you want students to access and have a meaningful engagement in the process and exit successfully at the end of their maybe 2, 3, even 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years at campus. And so this implies you take cognizance as a psychologist of the internal dispositional factors, environmental factors, and other behavioral factors which you addressed in your study. So thank you very much for that. In the process, you juggled so many variables, and this undoes the tradition of social science research elsewhere, where you have an IV and a DV, and that marks the end. Yet we know in life, the reality is that life is multidimensionally affected by so many variables. And so you have tried to do this. And given your age, by looks, I may be wrong because they say looks are deceptive. You have done your best to juggle the very many variables and given logical explanations, logical connections, and that is very good. But more importantly, you know, it doesn't make sense if it doesn't come in a good communication. Your language command is very good in the piece of work that I read. I said I'm going to confirm this because nowadays there is artificial intelligence that generates these things. But from the defense, I thought I was listening to someone from another accent elsewhere, you know, not our African accent. And so I thank you for that language command. And you made very good choices of your theories, though there could be issues with them later that we will come to in the next phase. Then you also did your best in the methodological command of the work, the epistemological command, and the axiological command of this work. Although you didn't, in certain respects, explicitly bring this out, as we shall see later. So thank you very much for that. And you, more importantly, for an academic, when you touch their time, you actually have insulted them so gravely. Actually, that would be a capital offense. So I found you here. In the other defenses, I will sometimes be the first person here. Today I was very late because you came earlier. So thank you very much for keeping time. But also you had prepared your mind and asserted the use of your 1 hour, which you have kept. We shall not quarrel so much about that. Yeah, so thank you very much for keeping that time. And I found you tweaking your slides to suit the context here. I think something could have gone wrong somewhere along the way in the process of maybe transferring them from your machine to Mr. Farouk's machine. That is not news because it has always happened. So I'm not going to blame you so much, though you will have to take blame all the same for the quality of the slides, for the congestion in the slides. In a way, I'm now transiting from the positives to the negatives. So we're going to the second phase of my being here. Note this, that you have done is meant for quality assurance, quality improvement. And so no one should take offense, and actually you should be very proud that you are almost like this man who is going to be born that was crucified. So if you really got crucified and you rose from here, then the PhD would make more sense. So whatever critical comments you'll get from the panelists and from the critical reader as well, please, they are meant for the improvement of the work, not to do the other PhD in the villages of pull him down or pull her down. But we want this work to be impeccable in quality. So let's go to the question session now. Why do you think Professor asked you to first tell us something about yourself?
I think one was to, of course, know who is the person before us. Rapport. But most importantly, I would think she asked me that question to tell her much about myself so that she would gauge who I am. Thank you.
Okay, she didn't find that about you in your work. She's a panelist. She was given the work to read earlier. So she wouldn't have asked you that question if you had a researcher positionality. Okay, that was the essence of it. Had you had a researcher positionality in your work, then she would have just known you already. The biases that you have brought into this work, the subjectivity that is wired in this work would have already been understood from that researcher positionality. Something that you need to take care of in further improving the quality of the work. And please, any little question that the panelists are going to ask you must be answered based on philosophy, epistemology, ontology, axiology at minimum. I'm happy you said you came from the seminary. I don't know whether minor seminary or major seminary. Minor or major? Okay, both. Fine. I wanted to hear that major one because the major begins with the philosophicum studies. So that's where philosophy is manufactured. So we expect that every answer you will give here, base it on those tenets of philosophy. Thank you. So can you take us to your objectives? Because some people say this is the engine of the work, others say it is the heart, others say it is the what, okay, the soul and all that. I'm sure in your practice as an educator and an educationist, one of the key things you do is to tell those who are upcoming to make objectives. So can you, with reference to the objectives you yourself have made here, tell us whether you find them appropriate or something needs to be done?
Thank you, Professor. One, I include the subvariables in the objective, which I think makes it become a little bit voluminous, but I did place them there following the recommendation of the external examiner, who noted saying, what you're putting forward, make sure that when someone reads it, he's supposed to know what you're talking about. So that I think makes them to be broad. That's one thing I would point out. But otherwise, I do think they're clear.
Yeah, you usually teach others that objectives should be SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound. Let's go to objective 1. You have clearly said you have put all variables in it. So there is no element of specificity. The same to objective 2, the same to objective 3. And once we have deconstructed this, then we shall have got the problem and the solution. So we shall be constructing the problem tree and the solution tree. So let's go to your findings of objective 3. It's only unfortunate the pictorial is not there, but let's go to it. And before I tell you my mind, I want to ask you, what is your PhD objective? Because at undergraduate, we do studies, at masters, we do studies, but there is something about a PhD that makes it different. And so the objective for that PhD must be realized. So what is your PhD objective?
As an education psychologist, there's been always passion for me from the nature of the study to ensure that I can use my knowledge to improve or to facilitate efficient, or rather successful transitioning of or having or creating a better environment for the students to be able to realize their goals. That is something that is at the heart of my center of my heart in doing actually this study, and also out there in practice to do ensure that I can provide or ensure that actually that environment is often created in the learning systems or learning institutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, that's what you have summarized here. And I provided this transitioning to your objective number 3 as an answer to the question I was going to ask. And you're very intelligent. You got it, but you also put it in your own words. Now, what you have said is seen in the A and B of the findings to your objective 3. Now, when you set out to cook matoke, for those of us who have had a bit of experience of cooking, you go and cut this matoke or buy it, and it will come in its peels, and you have to buy also some leaves, and yeah, you know the process. That implies at the end of the day, you have the peels, you have even the leaves, you have the sufaria, you have other things that are not going to be eaten. But you want to serve the matoke, though you may serve it in the leaves. And your aim is not the peels. But now what you have decided to do in your work is different from the purpose that you have just told us. You have served the matoke plus the leaves onto the person's plate, you know, plus the peels, and that's not good. So what we need to do is we isolate this cooked matoke now. At the end there, the DV, that comes out very clearly from objective number 3 is academic persistence, okay? At the beginning is conscientiousness. In the middle is what do you call this other? It's here. Yes, those experiences, you just tease them out. Social integration and academic engagement. These are four variables that stand out. These that stand out cannot be clumped together with other. For example, the conscientiousness is pulled out from so many other background variables. That implies you name it, give it that specific name, and flash it back in the title that I'm investigating conscientiousness, not academic background factors or background factors generally. No, you have not brought in all factors. So tease it out, that is your IV. Then the two intervening variables can be flashed in the middle, or depending on how you choose to phrase the title, I have offered suggestions in my report, can be brought later. And the DV, the academic persistence, is also named. I'm happy you have not done academic resilience, you have done academic persistence, which is different from what has usually been studied. So that implies we need now smartness in the title, we need smartness in the purpose, we need smartness in the objectives. And this therefore implies also all these other things you are suffering with, the gender, the entry scores, the exit scores, all these are demographic characteristics which you can use as explanatory variables for your study. I don't know whether we're together here. Such that when you tease out these key variables, then you can measure the levels of course, it's all done. It is all there in your work. You can measure the level of the DV, the measure of the level of the IV, and then Once you have measured it, you can differentiate it into those explanatory variables, the demographic variables of the entry scores, how these people vary on conscientiousness by their various demographic characteristics. And you do the same for the academic persistence. And if need be, you can also do it for those other intervening variables, but it's usually a lot of work that you can do later for other publications. I don't know whether we are together.
Greatly so. Thank you so much.
Okay, so that implies we are not smart. Agree?
Agree.
In our title, we are not smart. In our purpose, we are not smart. In our objectives. And when we are not smart in our title, in our purpose, in our objectives, that means we go back to the drawing board and make all these smart. Okay? We need to agree because here you are defending. Agreed?
Prof, I agree. I'll do work with my supervisors to improve that work. Thank you so much.
Okay. That implies our sitting here will not be too long. Like in court, they say you have not wasted the time of court. So I want to ask you the next question now. For all that I've said, I've provided guidance in the report, which implies your objective 1 could be on the IV, objective 2 on the DV, objective 3 is a mediation effect of maybe social integration, objective 4 mediation effect of academic engagement, and then you are almost done, because what you call a relationship as an objective is a step towards the structural equation modeling. Okay, what used to be an objective at masters becomes a step to achieving an objective at PhD. So you don't have to bring out this step now again as an objective. Go straight to the mediation effect. We know that to achieve a mediation effect, number 1, you need to determine the levels of the variables. Number 2, you determine the correlations, of course, things of normality and so on are taken care of. Number 3, you go into the regression. So you will have achieved the objective. What you are forcing on us as an objective becomes a step in achieving your PhD objective. Okay. Now we have to understand why you chose those 2 theories. And I see you struggling with the theoretical framework and the theories you have chosen. And in the piece of work that I was given, I don't seem to see the theoretical framework. Yeah, so why did you choose and how did you choose those 2 theories?
Thank you, Prof. Like I did mention, the focus was on the applicability and something that would guide. From my interaction with the literature, the essence of picking on a theory is to let you focus on the possible variables other than going for quite a number of them, which actually might not at the end of the day be resultant to what you're doing. And so looking at the study, I asked what would guide these mechanisms. So first and foremost, I should say, I did pick on both Astin.
Allow me to interrupt.
Thank you.
Yeah, you are making a choice out of very many, but we do not know the very many that you are choosing from. Okay?
Yeah.
So when this work begins, it begins with about 80% literature review and ends with about 98% literature review. And that's where we start as reviewers. That's where we go first. And when I go there in the review of related literature, I'm looking for the conceptual review, which you decided not to do. You mixed it up with the empirical review, which it needs to be teased out on its own, so as to give weight to the operationalization of your study variables in chapter 1. Then we look out for the theoretical review, which spells out all possible theories that could have been used to explain the links between the IV, the EVs, and the DV in your case. And the ones whose strengths outweigh the weaknesses are teased out to form the conceptual framework. The moment you talk of framework, you're talking of a collection of two or more. So that implies you now turn your conceptual framework. Can you flash it up, please? The conceptual framework. Yeah, just flash it up. Yes. Now, what you have put as input, environment, and outcome now becomes the theory of change, which is supported by the theories in explaining how changes in the IV can be explained. I mean, can affect changes in the DV through the mediating or moderating or generally intervening variables. Okay? Then this turns into a theoretical framework once you factor in the theory of change using the explanations deriving from those theories that you have chosen. So we need a conceptual framework, very separate. And this time it is not going to be background characteristics. That is too ambiguous. We are just going to focus on conscientiousness. Then in the middle, we are going to have social integration and academic engagement, which you measured. And here only academic persistence. I will tell you why we disagree with the CGPA very shortly. So we need that. You have seen where theory is used, and I'm happy you handled it well in the results section and discussion section. But what you are using there should be stemming from the theoretical framework, which is largely missing in the piece of work I was sent.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay. So you in your work clearly note that Makerere University in many respects, and I'm referring to now the law school, had to set pre-entry exams at a certain point. That is in your work, right? And also the performance of the students is what you are decrying, okay? Which implies you have now shot yourself in your own foot using these as independent variables, because you have already said they are not a good fit for predicting academic performance and academic persistence in this case. That's the measure of your performance. And you note that they are, even in your presentation, you said some of them wanted to work hard to prove that they did not cheat at A level. And the reason you gave for the law school setting its own exam is that it realized there was a lot of cheating at A level. So that implies the use of those entry scores. And eventually, we cannot even be sure that the CGPA that is generated is a virgin of those skirmishes of academic malpractice. Therefore, you are the one who shot yourself in the who shot that down. So I want to agree with you that we don't use it for the prediction of academic persistence. Is my agreement in order or not?
Prof, based on your argument, I will look into it and come forth to where you are. Thank you so much.
But otherwise, you can use it as an explanatory variable, just in case something good. And indeed, there is a lot of good that is coming out of it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to end the question session. I want to go to session number 3 now. You talked about social desirability, and indeed that was one of my questions. how did you handle social desirability? And if you didn't, why didn't you handle it, knowing that it was going to have effect?
Thank you so much, Prof, for the question. It's something actually I did discover later on. Okay, when I was thinking about what are the possible limitations of my study. It was coming at the element when I was doing the interviews. Something else, all of these narratives or assertions founding. And so I pointed out that in some situation, it might not have been, but also it could have been, but it's something that actually we as researchers need to take note of, that there's a possibility.
Thank you.
In,
Thank you. So that implies that will be one of the pieces of advice you're going to offer those who are coming after you, that when you are measuring these social constructs, you also need to measure social desirability, which you eventually subtract from the scores of those other social constructs to come up with a true measure of what you are measuring. I mean, of what you are looking for. And that aside, therefore, what other pieces of advice, maybe 3, will you give to PhD students who intend to also get to where you are now?
oh, thank you so much. Of course, one, it's a lonely journey. But like the topic was on persistent, I think it's very important that you keep close to your academic advisors, listen to their advice. I think I remember at one time when we were doing a master's, when I had a colleague who one time was given comments and he said, I'm not going to do this. I don't know how many years it took here, but I think it's very important to be close to listen to your academic advisors. Secondly, reading broadly, it calls for commitment and a sacrifice. Something I would point out. It can be mind draining, but one should persist. Thank you, Prof.
Okay, thank you. That's spot on. And I was just wondering, you gave us those reliabilities of the original instruments, validities and reliabilities of the original instruments, and then the reliabilities of your pre-tested instruments, and the reliabilities of the instruments after you collected data, the large-scale data for your study. I was just wondering, what if the reliability at the end of the day from your main study happened to be low? What will have happened? What will you do in that case? The other reliabilities were very good, but now you have gone to the field and the reliability turns out to be very bad. What would you do in this case?
Thank you for the question.
When he says that, you know that he's cooking an answer.
For sure. It's something how to look into it and see for the possibility of the future research. If that happens, what I would do.
Okay, in that case, with the reliability we are interested in is the reliability from the pretest. Yeah, so
Thank
this
you.
other one you give us later can suit. I mean, you can shoot yourself in your own foot.
Oh, thank you so much, Prof.
Okay, we want to transition to the guidance and pieces of advice. That is my second last. We talked already about the quality of the slides. That's something that you will advise those who are coming to present under your mentorship to look into some good time before the presentation starts. And eventually, when you leave from here, we have agreed that you are going to work on the title based on the comments that have been tendered in. You are going to come up with a smart title, a smart purpose, smart objectives. And you should acknowledge this, that you have missing sections. The theoretical framework is missing in the work that I read. There are aspects of the scope that are missing, and these are provided for in the in the report that I've given. And the philosophical paradigm that you have given does not bring out the axiological positioning, the ontological positioning, and the epistemological positioning. I personally have advised that it is good if you take on a constructivist lens as well, because yeah, the post-positivist is good, yes, but given the nature of your analysis, people are constructing their realities. You definitely would need a constructivist approach as a lens of looking at this. And then your researcher positionality, I think we are in agreement that you're going to put it in. And their results you have provided in the discussions, which you should shift to the relevant section, the results section, because you have verbatim quotations, and this is not provided for in your methodology, that you will use them for discussions, and so let them be shifted to where they relevantly belong. And it will seem a little bit of your Achilles heel is in interpreting statistics. You have given a surface, what you call a broad brush explanation of the statistics, and you have not gone deeper to give us, for the lay reader, an understanding of what you actually mean. For example, your beta values, your R values are not explained for the lay reader. This will be taken care of in a bit to improve the quality of the work. And a PhD has one unique characteristic, that it is meant to make a unique contribution in the discipline for policy, for practice, for methodology, for all these other aspects. And if possible, this should stand out either in a section within the results or a standalone section as your contribution. And this is not the significance, it is the contribution to policy, to practice, and it should stand out. And I would also advise that you come up with a policy brief to inform policy, because eventually this work needs to find its rightful place in practice, but must start with policy. There are so many other things, as the writers of the good, one of the writers of the good book says, if all of these were written, the world will not be enough. But there are so many other written things. If all of them were said here, we will spend the day here, since you did this work for quite a while now. So we need to tease out those key things which we think can improve the quality of the work. I'm sure colleagues are going to come up with so many other areas of improvement. I want to trust that you have taken note of these and you will work on them positively. Now I come to the last section to observe a moment of thanks that I am called here as a critical reviewer. Now the baptism has gone on and on from devil's advocate. The first time Dr. Lois called me, we want you to be a devil's advocate. I said, I don't want to be an agent of the devil. Now, through an opponent, no, you'll just be an opponent. And then the other time, I think it was lead discussant, and now it has become critical reader. Yeah, the baptism that you are giving me here, I cannot take it for granted. This must be based on trust that I am able to make a little contribution in line with my mission of life, that I should be able to make a little contribution to the other, who then can make a bigger contribution to others. So thank you for this trust, Makerere University and the College of Humanities and Social Sciences and the School of Psychology and department, my mother department. And then I want to tell you this now. If I had said it earlier, it would have introduced a little bit of bias. I was supervised at my PhD by Professor Kibanza, Grace Millie. And so, hey, Chibanza, sorry for the mispronunciation. So if I had brought this earlier, then it will have sounded biasing. You want to remain an opponent at that. So I welcome you to the family. And the first time she called me, when we started our interaction, said, bring here your rubbish. And it became palatable. I want you to take it also in that regard, that this can become palatable. And this for me has been a very good Christmas package that I am ending my year with an auditing of my academic relevance at the end of the year by such a sitting, which is the peak of our academic exhibition. So I want to thank you for this. And therefore, I wish all of us a Merry Christmas and a Merry festivities and a Happy New Year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Tibun. And colleagues, I think we are doing well in terms of time. Moris, you may have a seat briefly here as a way of trying to rest yourself. Mr. Le, do you think if he interacts with the panelists while there, it's fine? Okay. The panelists will come here. So this time around, the panelists are coming here so that you rest as they engage you. Thank you. May I invite members of the panel? Now, this is the guidance. We shall all work within 30 minutes, all of us. So that means each one should use at most 5 minutes. At most 5 minutes. Thank you. At most 5 minutes. The chair is speaking. The chair is speaking. Thank you so much. Who wants to go first? Should we start with the lady now that we have been men and men and men? And I would invite Professor Nansubuga.
Good morning, Chair and members. Good morning, Morris.
Morning, Prof.
I am also learning now to be positive. Normally, my comments come straight on what I need to improve. So, Morris, I would like to thank you for the presentation. I can see there are some modifications already in the presentation compared to what is in the book, and that is an improvement already. So I'm given a few minutes, so I'm going to be on point. And I'm not going to repeat what the discussant has already mentioned. I would like to start with your geographic scope on page 13. When you hear geographic scope, what comes to your mind?
Thank you, Prof.
Research, yeah.
The focus is on the space for which you're going to carry the study from. Is what comes to my mind.
Yeah. In your particular study, what is the geographic scope?
It was within Makerere University, and focusing on 4 colleges. Q's, I mean rather school of education, school of psychology, engineering, and then natural sciences.
So you are very specific to those. However, what you wrote in your geographic scope, if you can check your book, has nothing to do with that. You are talking about COVID. It's something like contextual scope rather than geographic scope. So I would advise that you check again and see whether you have written is the geographic scope. Then I would like also to know, what was your ultimate goal for carrying out this research? By that I mean, what did you want to see change at the end?
Thank you. What I wanted to see mostly changes the behavior of the students, what they should do once they're in here. It is a tendency to focus so much on institutional policies than actually you as a person who comes in the system, what your role is. And this way I was so much focused on them, look at their conceptualization, their experiences, and what needs to be changed so that we can improve. And thank you, Prof.
Okay, when I was reading your study population, I saw that you focused only on final year students. And the assumption is that those final year students are almost completing. So they have been persistent. Now, in your background, you also demonstrated in chapter 1, you demonstrated by giving evidence of the dropout rates in the university. And you gave a number of cases from different schools and different cohort years, which means that those particular students have certain kind of behavior. But in your population and sample, you focused only on those students that are persistent. Am I right? So how do you find out the behaviors of those students who are actually not persistent?
My goal was to focus so much on what are those who are what actually to get the experience, what are they doing that actually those who might be finding challenges can learn from those who are actually passing on. For example, when I got a chance to interact with some of these students, I was so enticed when someone says, for me, my mantra is never give up. Campus can be this, can be that. But for me, till the end, I've had challenges since first year. So actually, I want to look at what had they actually gone through that actually those who might be facing some of the same challenges could actually learn from those who are persisting, what they're supposed to do. That's why I did go that direction. Thank you, Prof.
But you have rules.
Sorry?
Your independent variable was background characteristics. And you are looking at things like previous schools, experiences in previous schools. You are looking at things like family income. And in one of your findings, you are saying that family income influences academic outcomes and academic persistence. And you said negatively, of course. Now, how come then that these students who have such backgrounds that you studied are persistent? And from general experience, we know students who come from very good backgrounds, very good schools, very good families, and they are dropping out here in Makerere University. But you ignored them. If I'm using the right word, I don't know. You ignored them completely and excluded them from your study. Don't you think that if you had studied those students, they would have given you actually better evidence, knowing what these students, that it is not necessarily because I'm coming from a poor family or I'm coming from a bad background school that I can persist. Don't you think that is a limitation within your study?
I do acknowledge, Prof. That was a limitation of the study. And I think something can propose future research to.
Did you do that?
I didn't. I do acknowledge. Thank you for pointing that out. It should be part of my improvement of the thesis. Thank you so much.
On methodology, and again, in your population, as I asked for the geographic scope, you have only 4 schools. What was the criteria for selecting those 4 schools? Because you talked about colleges with many students, but in this case, they are not even colleges, they are schools.
My focus was to look at the diverse, what happens within the different academic disciplines. While I should have been wider than that, but I pointed out earlier on the logistical problems that actually were on ground. Yes, but however here, I looked at, can I look at the experiences of those who are in STEM, then those who are in humanities? And that's what led me to.
What kind of approach is that? Is it convenience? Is it purposive? Is it random sampling? Because that's what I'm asking about. What
random sampling.
Random sampling, really? Please check.
I'll check that.
Random sampling is a probability sampling method. Yes. There is no probability sampling there.
I'll check that, Prof.
So please be clear in your book to give justification. Again, you talk about sample determination. And when you talk, even in your slide here, if you can put it back, when you talk about sample determination, you start talking about response rate. That is the diagram which you have there. What do you understand by sample determination in research? And at what stage did you determine the sample?
Thank you, Prof.
When I ask at what stage, because your population, your sample has colleges, has schools, and has students. So at what stage? And first, sample determination.
Okay. We'll determine the sample after what? Getting those what? We should have done it earlier on. I do recall first getting the population in these schools, the third years, especially in those programs which had more students. I got the number, and the earlier incident was to be based on the table of Greg, of which the number actually given to me there, if I was to go by that from the school, which had been included in the programs, I remember it should have been 600 and something also. However, after collecting the data,
the question is, how did you determine the sample? Because again, you are going back to sample non-response. We have, before you go for non-response is achieved after you have carried out what?
Yeah.
Research. But before you go to the field, you determine the sample.
Thank you, Prof. Sorry for that omission. Like I said, from the population that was put forward, the sample I determined was supposed to have been 600 and I think 28. That's what We should
How did you?
using a table of grade and what actually okay, basing on different colleges, the number they had. So I would get the schools and the program, how many students are in there,
Mhm.
and then look at the table and then determine the numbers
Which table?
of Craig and Morgan.
Do you have that in your book? Do you have that information in your thesis?
The table is there, but I then need to cross check if I
And the
include.
methodology, you have not mentioned that at all.
I need to cross check that. Thank you so much, Prof.
You were saying you used simple random sampling. Before I even go to that, do you want to say that the results of your research can only be generalized to the only 4 schools in Makerere University?
Not so the case. I believe that some of the experiences, given the environment when they're in, they affect all of them.
And that is the population.
Yes.
So even in your thesis, you are not clear what your population is. Please clarify on what your population is, and so that you only selected 4 schools and give justification how, whether purposive or random sampling, which is not the case, or convenient. Okay, so your methodology again, now you talk about the qualitative, quantitative, and it's not clear. When you are presenting here, what I saw in your presentation was different from what you wrote in your book. In your book, you said that you located only 14 students. Here you said that they had already consented. And I think that was the procedure, that before they had consented, but you were not able to reach them. I don't know what reason.
I justify the reason. By the time I did the qualitative data collection, first and foremost, the qualitative data was informed by the quantitative results. So the time it took to do the analysis, these students like right now who are clearing actually were out. So what happened is, while actually when you look at the consent forms were quite a number, but having to locate them, actually read them, actually some had even forgotten. Actually someone tells you, "Me, I thought you're coming the next day." Which of course we had informed them clearly that I would get back to them after the accomplishment of the data analysis for quantitative phase. And so it is for that reason that given some had actually been had dispersed geographically somewhere around. So for those actually who were well, when I asked them if it would be for one, they say it's okay. Then those who are within, especially actually those who were around clearing, I did meet them.
How many students had consented? Because even that is not in the
that's on a mission.
Yeah.
I have to get back to the consent forms.
Yeah. Please mention the number of students that had consented. But again, Moris, you need to know that you are doing a PhD and soon you are becoming an academic guru. And remember that you cannot fail in research. You cannot fail because someone moved, but is within Uganda. We can also do research with the people outside Uganda and you get in touch with them. So there are very many ways of getting in touch with them. Okay, data collection tools. In your methodology chapter, you have not described the measurement. How did you measure the scales? They are not there. Which scales did you use? Were they created by you? Were they already existing? So that information is not there. And one would wonder whether, because you are doing now mixed method, And my other concern is, how do you harmonize the two? Wouldn't you learn a possibility where you end up measuring two different things using two different instruments if you are not clear of the measures of your qualitative data questionnaires? So one would like to see that what you are measuring in interviews is the same thing that you are measuring when you are administering questionnaires, but you cannot find it in your write-up. Do you get what I mean?
I don't know that I've got you well, Prof.
So you don't have a section in chapter 4
Yes.
describing the scales you used in quantitative data collection. Am I alleging wrong things?
Prof, I included it. I've mentioned the questionnaire, and I mentioned the different scales and how they're going to be measured. They are right there. I don't know.
Maybe that's what you think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I will check that. Thank you.
Then the next data, and again, the arrangement, please rearrange. Before you go to data analysis, you start with the data correction. I also wanted to find out whether you know the difference between data management and data analysis. Because what you wrote under data management is actually what should be for data analysis. And you did not specify, although you specified the tests, but you did not align those tests with the hypothesis. And again, under your hypothesis, you do not have hypothesis on mediation analysis. You only have mediation analysis under objective 3, but you did not translate objective 3 into hypothesis that are testing mediation effects. You have your book. Yes. And I think I can stop there because there are also other people to give you feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Florence Nasubuga. And it seems you have set the ground for the rest of the panelists, who I think will, based on yours and for avoidance of maybe some repetitions. Dr. Nantam?
Thank you, Dr. Richard Balikowa. To Moris, congratulations for having gotten this far. It's not a mean feat to do a study of this number of years at this level and to be given an opportunity to defend your work. Like Professor Teboni indicated, and also given the size of this kind of work, there will definitely be areas for improvement. Using Professor Teboni's analogy, we are serving matoke, but there are some leaves in there. So the objective is to remove the leaves, which is okay at this stage. It would have been dangerous if when we checked the meal, we only have the the leaves and we can't find any matoke, but the matoke is there. So we are here to help you remove the leaves and then to serve a good meal. I would like to acknowledge that In terms of structure, format, I think you've tried to do a fairly good job, and also to include relevant content and to address the different issues in a robust way. You've handled quite a lot of data, which means that also predisposes you to make errors, which are not many really. And my focus actually will not be on the data, but will be on two specific things and maybe a few minor ones. I read your book. Going back to the title, you'll need to revise your title. There's a lot of redundancy, not a lot, there's some redundancy. When you say academic achievement, and then you break it up into academic persistence and performance, you see? That's a repetition. So either go for academic persistence and performance rather than academic achievement, or go for academic achievement. And then also in the title, you talk about an examination of factors. These factors, later you break them up into background factors and then institutional experiences. Why can't you highlight these in your title? Why can't we see that you're looking at background factors and institutional experiences in explaining academic achievement? I would go for the broader nomenclature, academic achievement, rather than talking about academic persistence and then performance. That is my observation, that you can make this title sharper. You can make this title sharper. And many times the rest of the research goes wrong because you haven't conceptualized well the title from the very beginning. But you're lucky, you're not in trouble. You're not in much trouble. Yeah, so you can correct the title without maybe having to go back to the field to collect data and so on. The other major challenge with your work or weakness with your work is the nomenclature that you use in your variables. The nomenclature that you use in your variables. It is not standardized and used consistently for almost each and every construct that you're talking about. I'll give an example. Or I'll give examples just to help you. You talk about, so what are we talking about here? If you talk about, let me talk about the dependent variable, so is it educational outcomes? Because at times we're using educational outcomes. Elsewhere, you're talking about academic success. Elsewhere, you're talking about academic achievement. Elsewhere, you're talking about academic performance. Elsewhere, you're talking about academic outcomes. I can only assume it's the same word, but I think that creates up a lot of ambiguity for anybody reading your work. Also, when you look at what you're calling background factors, are they background factors or background characteristics? Okay, are they background characteristics or background factors? Let's go to conscientiousness. Sometimes we're talking about conscientiousness, sometimes we're talking about personality. I know conscientiousness is a subset of personality. So and then also, in terms of personality, we know this conscientiousness is derived from the big 5 personality. Why don't you provide a justification much earlier rather than waiting for the scope to justify why you've picked conscientiousness out, only conscientiousness out of the 5? And then I think for me, it's okay after you have justified, then you continue using the word the construct conscientiousness rather than going back to refer to personality. Or if you choose to use personality, you can then say personality as measured based on conscientiousness. So there is need for that consistency. academic engagement. Sometimes I use calling it academic engagement, sometimes I'm calling it academic involvement. As an organizational psychologist, I know there is a difference, for example, between job engagement and job involvement. You see? But you use these words very loosely, very loosely. And for me, that is a major weakness with your work. If you can clean up these, then it will be okay. Then sometimes you're saying social integration, sometimes you're saying student, institutional, student, I think social integration. Okay. Then sometimes you're calling it academic engagement. Sometimes you're saying goal engagement, you see? So there is lack of consistency. This other variable, sometimes you're calling it cumulative GPA, elsewhere you're calling it university grades, you see? Persistence, sometimes just alone persistence, elsewhere you're calling it student persistence, elsewhere you're calling it academic persistence. So those are very serious, that's a very serious weakness in terms of the nomenclature of your variables. My suggestion is that you need to pick the best phrase and then use that consistently. And because if you had said, for example, that academic was that the involvement, that academic engagement is the same as academic involvement, then after that we shall be okay, whichever you use. But here I'm saying social engagement, academic engagement, then later I find academic involvement, then I can only assume that maybe it means the same. Then there is the issue of institutional experiences. Is it really student experiences? You're measuring student experiences if you can go to the conceptual framework. Institutional experiences. So you have, for example, academic involvement, which should be academic engagement, not so? That's what I'm talking about. For example, they were saying academic. So someone may say, I'm not saying academic engagement. Then you're talking about academic commitment. Elsewhere, you're talking about goal commitment. So that needs to be cleaned up. But when I look at this, so is it then student institutional experiences or institutional experiences as it first comes out? And is it really institutional experiences or experiences of the student? Yeah.
I picked the language from the theories, but I think I can modify them to student experiences.
And that questionnaire, what is it called? The questionnaire that measures these middle variables.
It is a institutional integration scale.
The student
institutional integration scale.
Institutional, okay. I think there's need to allude to the student, as I saw in the questionnaire.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, that's the major issue with your work. Then objective 3, why do you combine the relationship with the mediation? Why can't you have a separate objective addressing the mediation? Yeah. These are just questions you may not have to respond immediately. Then also your research question 1. You need to look at it. The way it is framed is like it's a quantitative question. And when I looked at the questionnaire, actually the questionnaire is okay in terms of the interview guide. So you could possibly simply go straight and ask the students, what are the background issues that affect academic performance? There it will be sharper. You need to provide citation in your conceptual framework, in your scope, especially the conceptual scope. I saw a bit of, you defined, for example, you say conscientiousness, was picked from the other big five because it has been shown in the literature to predict, but without giving us any authorities. So you need to work on that. Then I felt that you delved so much into your theoretical frameworks in the background, and yet the same information is repeated in the literature review. So you could possibly, working with your supervisors, introduce a bit of that this study is based or grounded in these theories and a few things, rather than, because for me, I thought, oh, he has provided the concept, the theoretical framework in the background. Yeah. So these are just my thoughts. They may make sense, they may not, but at least let them help you to reflect and see. Then under literature review, introduction, you provide us what to expect in the chapter, but you don't include the hypothesis. In the introduction, I don't know whether it's me who missed it. Part of the introduction to the literature review, that in this chapter, I present this kind of information, but I don't see the hypothesis coming out. So look again. In the interest of time, you don't have to respond. This is not fatal, but I need to mention it. In another study, it would have been fatal. Doing a pilot study in a population we are going to do the main study is not recommended. I'm just assuming you didn't use the social science students or students from the School of Social Science. In the questionnaire, you don't provide for how you measured academic performance. You only stop at persistence. I don't know whether I'm being fast, but you can always check, look at me out, and I provide that information. Okay. Recommendations. This has been said. You provide recommendations for practice, but you don't provide recommendations for theory, recommendations for policy. Sometimes we provide recommendations for education. And also the other major omission is your contribution. That is very, very important. It's a doctoral study that you've taken many years. What are the contributions? What are the contributions of your study? And then finally, in the abstract, I don't see any allusion to the qualitative data. How did the qualitative data support the final findings and then recommendations? Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Maurice, you take these comments as very reinforcing in terms of making your work very strong. And I want to thank you, the opponents.
Assistance to graduation. That's what I'm saying, student assistance. Standardize approach.
Thank you. Dr. Ampaire, would you want to come here? Thank you. And I have decided that I leave yourselves to time yourselves.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Dr. Moris. I want to congratulate you. I think you did great work. Nevertheless, you can't do something good without any hiccups. But they have already said that you take it in good spirit, because we are all here to uphold the name of our great institution. I should say that much of what I had wanted to say has been raised, maybe to put emphasis. At first, when I looked through I'm well aware that the software, as some of us got, was and is still work in progress. And I'm sure maybe you could be having a different version of what we are having. So you just take note. If you have already worked on it, then that is okay. Well aware, I'm just going to Yes, what I want, first of all, Dr. Simon has talked about some areas where you're lacking some source of information. I have not specifically noted the pages, but he has said it. You go through that. It was quite common. Maybe you have already worked on that. That's why I was making that exclaimer. So there were the sections whereby you are alluding to the literature, but which literature was not being cited. Then an issue on research questions has also been pointed out. You know, at first when I was looking at when I looked at the research question, I was seeing that you were just translating the quant objectives into questions. But with the guidance still that has been given to you, you can sharpen them and they will make your work very clear. APS style adherence. I looked at the structuring of your work. Maybe I realized that I need to go back to the APA 7th edition. Maybe there are some sections I could have missed out, but some of the sections you may need to realign because some you were putting them, actually some were misplaced instead of being in the right position. Me, I'm just making it general because I'm aware this is work in progress. Maybe something specific. I was interested when I looked at your student participants cutting across STEM fields and humanities. I only got concerned, but you have already come out of the field. Don't go back because you are a positivist. You know, I was saying how I wish, like Professor Tibun had said, that if you had used social constructionism, it would have been, you know, it would have yielded richer experiences. But you know, you made an exclaimer that you were trying to force, and that is where I got annoyed with you. But you'll forgive my annoyance because you made an exclaimer that you're trying to look for the causal explanations and understanding of your quantity results. And in my heart, I was saying, why? Because you missed out the gist now of the matter. But that is your design and that is your approach. Maybe adding my voice to what the political reader had said, then give it to us, justify, because we are not saying, we can't let you go back. So you have to give us a justification of why, as an educational psychologist, you chose what you chose. You boxed these students' experiences into your parameters, which you wanted, which made you miss out on the vast experiences which you ought to have got, and from which implications and good recommendations for practice, even theory and whatever policies would have based on. So generally, I am not saying that you respond, but in my heart, I was saying, with this vast background, vast university experiences, we're aware that you have already identified the problem and we're aware that these students have their aspirations and educational outcomes. Now, why were you forcing them to think in the way you wanted them to think? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anyampeye. Members online, we request that you post your comments online there in the chat, and we shall be able to choose those that we can maybe send to the candidate. We appreciate those that have already sent in theirs. Dr. Wilbur Karugahe. Meanwhile, as you come, I also inform members that we are joined by Professor Peter Okay, Baguma. You're welcome, Professor Baguma.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much, Moris, for the good presentation. I want to re-echo what the critical reviewer already said, that our purpose of being here is to help you strengthen the work. We are not here to fight you. I have two questions, and I will actually begin with what was already re-echoed by Dr. Simon about personality. Can I invite you to go to your conceptual framework? Okay, so Moris, in your conceptual framework, you're telling us that you're studying personality as one of the personal characteristics, right? But when I looked through your work, you chose to focus on one aspect of personality out of the big five. You specifically focused on consciousness. Why did you omit the other four?
Thank you so much, Doctor. I looked at all the entire big five factor, that is extroversion, neuroticism, agreeableness, conscientiousness. And what happened was I looked around the challenges learners do or may encounter along the way or the journey and there at university. What of these five can be more applicable, more constructive to seeking the understanding of what really can contribute towards persistence or performance? And that pushed me to look at conscientiousness, especially given the facets of conscientiousness, the attributes of a conscious person. And if this can be looked at, and at the end of the day recommended to the students, I think we can have it contribute to having more of academic success in their life.
Thank you. Because I mean, the reason why I'm asking that question is because you omitted an aspect of openness, which is actually one of the big five. And to me, I thought that this would give you valuable information about the learners. So my concern is, do you think omitting these other four aspects of personality had an impact on your research?
Certainly it could be, and so it can be, I think, one of the areas I can talk about as a limitation of the study, of focusing on one of the factors out of the four, and henceforth, I would recommend that for future studies, who are interested in looking at the influence of personality, the experiences, stroke, outcomes, they should include them. But however, I need to know that from the very start, I was questioned of having so broad or many things I was looking at, and I was advised to a little bit tone down and look at specifics. And that's why I went for conscientiousness. And like I said, openness would be a good thing to look at. But looking at the factors beneath each of those factors, it's what made me want to go for conscientiousness.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. Because this is an issue, you cannot study one aspect of personality and then give an impression that you studied personality. So it's between you and your supervisor to make a decision whether you actually focus on consciousness or you keep on talking about personality. Okay, I also wanted to talk about your reliability scores. Can you please project the reliability scores? Yes, thank you. In your presentation, you did mention that all the questionnaires were reliable. Is that statement still true after looking at those results?
One was a little bit short of the threshold.
Yes, which is persistent, which scored the Cronbach's alpha of 0.67. So what are the implications of you going out to the field with an unreliable instrument?
It's something I need to look at and look at the implications of that.
Yeah, because I mean, that is very, very important, especially if these are pilot test reliability scores. I expected you to have, picked on that and, rectified it. So I think you need to talk about this in your limitations, possibly. Now, as I end, this study was carried out among Makerere University students. So if you met the dean of students today and you wanted to tell her about your findings, what is it so catchy that you would tell the dean of students out of your major finding?
Thank you so much. I think around this year, at some point, she wrote a letter questioning, I think, especially the students from government sponsorship about how they're not actually taking so much seriousness. I think the studies our engagement at university. And so if I got an audience with her, among the things I think I would point out, it would take me to the aspect of, I think, personality. It was quite keen, looking at actually, for example, what conscious students were tend to do. And like I did a recommendation, can we hold, say workshops to point out some of these practical skills of a student. For example, for a conscious student, the ability to be able to be organized to schedule their plan throughout the semester, a week or a month, I think it makes them to easily go through or meet through. So I think something I would point out to her.
Okay, and of course, then that takes me to your recommendation section. Did you make any recommendations to the managers of institutions of learning?
It is something I think I'm going to have to make specific because I made them. Actually, what happened is when you look at recommendation for practice, some of them are going to students, but actually some of them aren't meant for them. So I need to go back and realign that, which ones are for, let's say, for administrators or managers of institutions, which ones applies to the students themselves, which ones are for theory, which are for future research, to make that clear. And I'll take that advice. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and of course, the reason why I asked that question was an indirect way of saying you need a recommendation in your recommendation section to the managers and people in charge of the welfare of these students. So thank you so much, and I wish you the best. Congratulations.
Thank you. Dr. Samuel Uma, you're welcome. Thank you so much. Dr. Samuel Uma is a member of the higher degrees of the School of Psychology in this college. Thank you so much. May we invite Dr. Francis Eboy?
Thank you, Dean and Chair. Thank you, Maurice, for the presentation. And I know coming to this level, you've gone through a lot. And of course, even today, you're dealing with a lot. Regarding the data. So probably you'll need to justify why you are saying the bigger part was quantitative and not qualitative, but not using the numbers. So you probably improve on your justification. Two, you decided to manually I can go ahead. Okay, thank you very much. Chair, you said you decided to manually analyze the qualitative data, well aware that you had so much data that you could not complete, and you actually left out some. And you also said in your write-up, which is clear, that you adapted Bound and Clark's 6-phase approach, which included 1, becoming familiar with data, generating initial codes, searching for themes, and reviewing the themes. Is that right?
Yes, Doctor.
Okay. Now, if that was so, why then do you tell us that when you read it manually, you were able to get familiar and understand the context under which the students were responding?
One of the things I did take so much time on during this whole study, I think, was on qualitative, compared actually to quantitative. That I would meet my supervisor, and then you meet, and then you agree on what you're supposed to do. Then a few hours, you're good to go. But when it came to qualitative, my experience when I was interacting with, of course, I got hold of a number of the things they were mentioning, and the aspect of looking for exactly what explains, because my intent was how do the qualitative or subjective notions of the students explain these findings. And to get those contextual notions, by following actually first and foremost, I did not miss out any data. Actually, all the 14, I did what? I did go through them, analyze them. But however, because I was looking for those contextual issues, which I feel that, okay, I think from what I've seen from the field, I can easily allocate them. So that's what made me go for the manual analysis.
Moris, but I think then what you need to do is to justify that so that it becomes clear to the reader why one would opt for manual analysis as opposed to the software. Lastly, still on qualitative, but broadly dealing with your mixed method. You need to mix or to integrate. At what point did you integrate qualitative and quantitative data in your study?
Okay, thank you. From the very start, I wanted to see that whichever significant result I got out, I had to have a justification for it. And henceforth, in my reporting of the findings, as soon as I report the quantitative results, I bring in the qualitative themes to illustrate that profile. And something that also came up from the external examiner, he had recommended that actually I do that. And so, of course, I had done it, but then also I think something he pointed out, I think it came and actually was quite mixed up. His recommendation was I need to bring or carry, especially the narratives, into the discussion. So that actually I have that alignment to back it up. And so in the current manuscript I'm having, that's what I have done. Thank you, Doctor.
So you confirm that the integration or mixing was done at the findings or the results section?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Moris. That's all for me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. This is coming at a time when we are preparing to give room to some jitters outside, and I think we are not doing so bad in terms of time. Okay, Professor Atibuni has some few comments to put across, but before he does, I am also a panelist. Now, I want to advise, when you go to, in the likely event that you have been cleared to print the final book, please stick to the font that we are using in Makerere. And that most likely is the ordinary Times New Romans. Number two, when you are presenting here, you talk about limitations. And when you presented your limitations, I also got intrigued and went in the book and checked the section of limitations. You have been more theoretical in presenting your study limitations. Indeed, you've gone ahead to do literature review of limitations. So theoretical. Now, when you say one of the limitations is the limited numbers of qualitative, I thought you would scientifically have determined the qualitative respondents. Not just saying, let me take 14 or 40, and I should just take a sample. If you're doing mixed methods, you should have to know that they are not merely multi-methods. It is a mixed methods study, and the design you choose has to adhere to the guidelines of each of the strands of your study of the mixed methods. So that limitation you broadcast of more limited sample of qualitative, did you want a census when you're doing qualitative? No. Now in your book, you also talk of you definitely qualitative bias and then quantitative bias in terms of respondents. So you are not trusting your work throughout, because when you're saying you think that they quantitatively were biased when they are responding to the questions, then you're not being a psychologist in nature. You respect the respondents. And if you're using methods, have the confidence to present the data if it is not having flaws in the processes, then you would be okay to confidently present your work. So if you say you are scared of the quantitative biasness and qualitative biasness, then why did you bring the data and you went ahead even to analyze, and you spent all that time, and then you have a huge book? So please don't stab something into your foot again. There are limitations that can be there. You had talked of generalizability. You would have maybe described the uniqueness of the environment within which you collect this data, and that can suffice as a limitation. So even if limitations are based to all those that you gave, do not necessarily bring a literature review of them and then say they must be there cited as limitations. Thank you so much. Finally, from me, would you comment on the strength of the mixed methods design, because you called that sequential, explanatory sequential design? And in there, I wanted you to be specific. Why was it explanatory sequential, and did you value both strands at the same, or there was a strand which was bigger than the other, and therefore you had to make a follow-up? And maybe, did that one have any impact on the timelines of your study? Because explanatory sequential would mean you go to the field, you come do analysis, then you go back to the field, having seen what you need to go back to discover more, as compared to the concurrent when you're collecting this data. Maybe that one only you may give a comment, but the others they are just observations that should be a basis for you to improve our work.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. On the last one, what is the advantage of going for a sequential explanatory and mixed research method? I ought to note that it was one of the things I did discover when I was reading much of the literature, especially on a subject of persistence, where it's much dominated with the profiles. And so I went for this, and my focus was to have an explanation of whatever comes out to be significant, because if I'm going to make any recommendation, then it has been informative. And of course, like you said, with it, it's a follow-up to what has been discovered. And on that note, it was done. I went back to the participants after I had now discovered what exactly required to be explained. And I think this is why when you look into some of the questions or research questions, they are much linked to seeking a clarification to each and every other finding that came out to be significant. And just a small hint, I do think somehow in my presentation, I was being oriented by some of the comments of the external examiner who had pointed out the things I should address in the literature. Though, of course, actually in my study, actually in my manuscript, for example, the issue of the 14 participants, it's not an issue when it comes to qualitative research and data, because as long as I put the point of saturation, then it is sufficient enough. I do thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Moris. I was very cautious that the version of the book I received could have had some differences from the versions that are probably circulated to the panelists and maybe external examiner and so on. So I reserved so many comments, as I earlier said, written. So somehow what is written might be a little irrelevant if it's already addressed, but we thank God if it's already addressed. Now, I kept also ticking from what the panelists were saying, and these are the few areas which are not yet ticked from my list there. One is the ethics. Yeah, you claim to have gone through ethical processes, but there is no evidence for this apart from the permission letters by the deans. So it will be important to have the ethical clearance letter appended. We expect this at 3 levels. One is by the ethics committee that you submitted the work to. Second, by Uganda National Council for Science and Technology. That is if you proceeded to that level, and it's mandatory. At PhD level, the researchers will be cleared by Uganda National Council for Science and Technology, and eventually permission granted by the Office of the President. So that's the 3rd level. I thought this needs to be emphasized. Secondly, there should be no confusion between conscientiousness and consciousness. Yeah. Then thirdly, there is in the version of the book that I have, you copy the problem from the background, just copy paste. Yeah, so that needs to be addressed, and it also happens in some other areas. I have provided both the reviewed book and the report. I hope that will help in addressing that issue. And then third, the font issue has already been raised. I thought it was because of transmission. You know, when you are submitting this work, it can change font sometimes. I thought mine was because of that, but it seems those who have read the hard copy books are already complaining about it. And APA 7 provides 5 fonts. I have provided them in the report. Probably that will be helpful. But in the references, as already said, there are works that you cite and are not referenced. And one of them is mine. At Tibuni et al. 2017, it is cited but not referenced. So I also noted, plus a few others that I've noted in the work. But more importantly, there's need to provide the digital object identifiers. APA 7 requires them. The DOI for all your references. Yeah, I think you initially used the reference manager and then eventually tenaciously now worked on each, our requirements in psychology, which was very good, but you need to go back and provide the DOIs of those references. Yeah, these are a few things that I thought, were not checked from my list there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think I should give you this copy because Professor Nasuga could refer you on a certain page for something. These are all for improvement of this work that will be attributed to Makerere University all the entire of life. Professor Nasuga? It's okay.
These are just simple errors. Moris, do you know the symbol for Spearman correlation? The symbol. What is it? It's a P.
Yes. I know Pearson is R, and then for Pearson it's sort of like it's a P sort of.
So open page 113. What is the symbol for level of significance?
Come again?
The symbol for level of significance?
It's a P.
Smaller p.
Yes.
Do you see on that table 18 that you have a P and then you have significance?
Oh, I do recognize that you overlap. I think when I
So
was
the symbol is R with the S.
yes.
Spearman. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Also, I think you check your mediation tables.
Yes.
You had corrected here when you were presenting the symbol for beta.
Yeah.
But somewhere you had written a smaller b.
Okay.
Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. And now, members of the public, we may have a hand or two in a way of, but before we can invite a hand, we have members that have been online and they have also given us comments. There is this comment where someone announces that is learning from Kigali. I think that one we've known in the geographical location of the attendant. Thank you, Joshua, for learning from Kigali. But many of them were congratulating you and saying it's great work. And I think there is one who is also, I think, a student in School of Psychology, asks, how will your study benefit the students directly? Since you used them as the affected group, how will your study benefit the students directly since you used them as the affected group? And by the way, you are also a student. Were you a participant? It's a joke.
Thank you. I think that issue came from, I don't know, it was Dr. Who asked, say that if today if I got an opportunity to have an audience with the institutional managers, what would be my recommendations? And I think that's where I hope that it would impact or affect the students who are participants or benefit them in such a way. I thank you.
Thank you. So that was from Sarapio Serunjoji. And the rest of the others are only fearing the discussions, saying they are toughest discussions. Dan Magala, oh, this one is only present, I think. I only read a dot from him. But we thank you for attending this defense, Dan. So Dan Magala is a member of staff in the School of Psychology. Mr. Ansereko? You can come and raise your question from here.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you so much for the great presentation. But I have one thing that I've noticed, and it kept eating at me, so I thought I should let it out. So the issue concerns the quantitative part of your study. You say that you had about 900 and so participants, right? Is that correct? You had about 900 participants?
No, that was what was returned in terms of the questionnaires.
Okay.
But there were more than that.
Okay, thank you so much. So the issue came during your presentation. You say that you used simple random sampling. Is that right? So according to what I know, when it comes to simple random sampling, it's often effective when you're dealing with a very small sample population size. So I wonder how practical it was for you and how cumbersome it might have been for you to pull off over 1,000 respondents using simple random sampling. But I'm only saying this, you may take it or under advisement. Then I would propose, if I were maybe in your shoes, for lack of a better word, I would propose to rather go for a systematic, stratified, proportionate random sampling. That would be more justifiable than simple random sampling. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gerard. When Professor Nansuga was engaging the candidates, one audience says, the lady has been really critical about the methodology, which is educative. And this one knew you as the lady, good enough. We also have that as Samsung SM. The name is not there. So the name is commenting, the Samsung is commenting about the lady. So, but they're all appreciating. Thank you so much. In yes, Professor Baguma, as I think the last member of the public, and then we shall be nearing calling this.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to waste time moving. Let me talk straight away from here. The first comment is language use, particularly focusing on pronunciation. In psychology, you have a lot of terminologies, and it becomes disheartening to find that psychologists cannot pronounce them properly. So that personality word, conscientiousness, pronouncing it awkwardly. And I feel shame. So we thought before I came here we could rehearse so that you communicate properly. Conscientiousness. Yes, you rehearse. I mean, it becomes a dangerous when you stand here and say, I'm a psychologist, and you cannot pronounce the words. Yes. My second comment is, presenter, can you show us with evidence that persistence is a problem where you studied it? Quickly. Is persistence a problem where you studied it? With evidence.
Thank you, Prof. Some of the schools for which I've mentioned here, like you're saying, evidence may not be there. Originally, I was supposed to study at School of Education, but I was advised to expand. So you're right. That's it. So at the end of the day, since I was so much focused on the experiences, the shared experiences of students.
Don't go far. I'm talking about persistence. Do you know what persistent means?
Yes, Prof.
What does it mean?
Holding on to something in spite of the setbacks or challenges, what that one
academic terms.
As in academic terms, yes. It would be someone carrying out being able to enroll semester to another
and remain enrolled,
yes,
for quite some time.
Yes.
So is that a problem in the schools you studied?
Like I said earlier on, I would get back to the first position. Thank
So
you.
note that you have to show that persistence is a problem and also performance is a problem in percentages or whatever. How many failed? How many pass? Have people written about it in newspapers and so on TV? People are talking about poor performance in those schools. Okay, so lastly, conceptualization. You go to your conceptual framework. Also, it's my last comment. Okay. Yes, I can go ahead. There are variables, but I don't see arrows between variables. Yes.
Prof, as he just opens, I think it was a problem
The
with
conceptual framework.
when I transferred my work to his PC. It did not capture those arrows.
So you are not ready.
No, it was already, I think now they're there. Yeah, so you can close my transfer.
Yes, but there are still arrows missing. For example, is it CGPA? Yes, there's a relationship between CGPA and performance. No, don't you think so? Yes. Yes. But CGPA influences graduation. Isn't it that graduation? Somewhere at graduation. I think there is a relationship there. Certain GPA will qualify you to graduate, and others will not qualify to graduate. So there should be an arrow from CGPA to graduation. And even all those variables, there should be arrows between them. All those variables there, especially the middle variables, would also be influencing each other. And we need to see that also in the literature review. Are we together? So it is not, they are not parallel, but there could be interactions, influences between the variables.
Okay.
Even those in the box. Are we together?
Yes, Prof.
So think about it deeply.
Thank you.
Because that is the problem of conceptualization,
Yeah.
which people have been hinting at. You see, you think about them deeply and see if there could be relationships between those. And in the first column, that first column, there should also be a title. So I think those are called background characteristics. Not just broadcasting them like that, but there could be subheading even inside the box that these are background characteristics. Are we clear? Yes, I think we could do better in conceptualizing and showing the relationships between the variables. Thank you very much. I have more to say, but I think you should visit me.
Thank you, Prof.
So that we talk more.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, and all members of the panel, our dear critical reader, and then members of the public. We want to say thank you for the time. We were also joined by Dr. Paul Nyende from the School of Psychology. Dr. Nyende is also a member of the higher degrees in the School of Psychology in this College of Humanities. Now, members of the College of Humanities have an activity soon that have been invited to by the principal. So we want to look at time as much as important. May we request members of the public, apart from the panelists, including the critical reader and the supervisors that are present, can stay so that we use 10 minutes or less to make a deliberate. The candidate should lead them when they are moving out. And don't go far. Members online, please don't go far. Keep on the line. We shall soon come back as we prepare to come to the end of this very important session. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You're very welcome back, members of the public. And this is our very last session. But before we wind up the session, as we are here, the Dean School of Psychology joined us, Dr. Martin Baluku. You're most welcome, and I think we have fared well, although we had missed you earlier on. Now we come to the final line. Moris, the panel seated here have found your thesis and work worth the award of a PhD in psychology of Makerere University. They have, however, proposed among others the following. One, work upon the title to make it clear and reflective of the key study constructs. Realign your methodology chapter. The thesis has to reflect adherence to the APA 7th edition. You need to choose the most appropriate phrasing for the constructs and consistent throughout your work. Check objective 3, and revisit it. You may need to separate it into 2. These and the other comments will be availed to you by the registrar of the school at an appropriate time. So you will either be called or you'll keep checking with the registrar. You have been given up to. You've been given up to 3 months maximum to address these comments and produce a final thesis for submission. And the committee has assigned you someone who will support to oversee when you're working with your supervisors to address these comments. And that's Dr. Simon Nantam. So he's the one that will be working as your overseer. From me, the panelists, the critical reader, the entire School of Psychology, higher degrees, and the college, we congratulate you. May I invite you in 1 or 2 minutes to give your last remarks.
Thank you so much, the chairperson, acting dean. I just want to come here with a vote of thanks to express my appreciation for granting this opportunity to have this day present my study. I want to thank God who has enabled me in this journey. It has been quite a tasking one, a tough one. Some have not partly has happened to me before, and to be here, it is quite a miracle. I thank God for saving me that accident, that I can now walk and be here. I want to thank my supervisors, here present Dr. Mataj and Professor Grace Chivan in abstention, for the tireless effort in guiding me to come up with this study and to reach this position. I want to thank the members of my doctoral committee for your tireless guidance in this journey. Your insights were so commendable in shaping my study. In special, I want to thank the head of department, Dr. Lois. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you once again for all the efforts you have put towards this day becoming a success. I want to thank the administration of the School of Psychology, headed by the Dean. Thank you for that enabling environment that help pursue this course. I want to thank the critical reader. There was a workshop asked this, it was once said, thank you so much for that, for those comments. And I know they're going to help me to better study, and also as for me as a person to become a better academician and a researcher tomorrow. I thank you so much, Professor Dales. I thank the members of the panel for your very wise comments. I'm very sure by the time I submit this work in the time given, it will be a better work. I do thank you so much, and that I do wish that God continue using you to create other better minds. I thank the members of the public for your comments and encouragement. Thank you all for being there. I've gotten the messages of encouragement. To thank some and for those who are still on this path. One word I can say is don't give up. Keep going. Listen to all the comments and advice that comes along the way. With that, I would want to, of course, I know my wife is online somewhere. I didn't think I would be here. For members of public and members here, in January I was coming from 40 and I got a terrible accident and I fractured much of my body. But she's been there with me. At some moment, I was doing this work while standing to have the work. So I want to thank her for her support throughout this journey. Now with that, once again, I want to say thank you. And for lack of better words, may God bless you all. Yeah.
Thank you. This higher degrees meeting has now been disbanded and dissolved. That's why I should use appropriate words. And I want now to allow photo moments, courtesy of Farouk. We want to thank you, Farouk. Photo moments. You can come, Farouk, you can